High on praise and exaltation, we are Hope 103.1 FM. Hope 103.1 FM, reaching our nation for God.
Chosen generation with a call. Blessed Wednesday afternoon to one and all. It's a joy to be in the land of the living, and we have the joy of the Lord as our strength. We do apologize for the late start in today's session of Leadership Plus, but we are excited to be here with you, and we thank you for joining us. Yes? God has given me. I know who I am. I know who God says I am. What He says I am. Where He says I am. I know who I am. I know who God says I am. Today we're discussing on a very interesting topic. Where He says I am. I know who I am. I'm working in power. I'm working. Christ, the great communicator. And we are here with none other than Reverend John Lewis, as he safely takes us through under this topic. I live the life of favor, for I know who I am. Pleasant afternoon to you, Reverend John. How are you today?
Hello, good evening. It's good to be back with this new program on this new topic, Christ, the great communicator, improving your communication skills by imitating the master.
Yes. And as we have already said, we're discussing under the topic communication. And we know that communication involves three components: verbal, non-verbal, and paraverbal. Paraverbal involves the things we say and non-verbal. Echo, could you hold?
Blessed love the time. I love you, Jesus. Just your love. Father, thank you for your son.
So, as I was saying, we're dealing with communication today. And we know that communication involves three main components: verbal, non-verbal, and paraverbal. Paraverbal deals with the pitch or the tone of what we say. Verbal, of course, deals with what we say, and non-verbal is our actions and gesticulation, expressions, and so forth. And one of the authors you would have to refer to before, that's Peter Drucker, he said, the most important thing in communication is to hear what is being said. In your own words, Reverend John, could you tell us why is it important that leaders develop their communication skills?
Great. So we want to discuss 6 principles on how we can communicate. One is to simplify the message. Secondly is to know the people whom you're communicating with. And then you must share the passion that you're communicating with, seize the moment, and you want to be there communicating creatively and effectively. So these principles that we want to look at as we walk through the steps today, simplifying the message. The success of your leadership and your relationship with others depends a great deal on your ability ability to come. Many of the best thinkers are not leaders. Why? They cannot communicate. Your leadership rests on your ability to connect with people, share your ideas and vision, and motivate them to partner with you. And so there's a biblical reference to this in Matthew chapter 13, 3 to 10. Jesus shared most of his message through stories. He shared them, 7 of them in this one chapter. He used the power of simple, familiar narratives, and the educator takes something simple and makes it complicated. The community takes something complicated and makes it simple. It gives them a point for their head and a picture for their heart. So here's some rules of communication. It's called the rules that Jesus used. 1, have a strong beginning. B, have one theme. And C, simple language. Paint familiar pictures, have clear objective, and expect a response from the heart. So simplify, simplify, simplify. As we seek to communicate the message of Jesus used down to earth, as referred to in scripture, as parables, stories that they could connect with. So while he was talking to sowers of seeds or people involved in the agricultural industry, he would talk about a sower went forth to sow seed. Or if we were talking to fishermen, he would take them out on the Sea of Galilee and demonstrate to them the principles of communication. And so every audience is different. And so we understand the context in which and to whom we're communicating to. So they understand the illustrations that we use. If we're talking to the children, we would use examples, illustrations that they would be familiar with. If we're talking to young people, adults, so our mode of communication, the stories and examples that we'd use differ in terms of the audience that we are seeking to communicate it. So have simple language, familiar pictures, have a clear objective, what we're seeking to communicate to the particular audience that you're seeking to reach. So simplify the message is a starting point of communication. And secondly, we need to know the audience, know the people. It's not just what you say, but how you hear it. So the lesson here is that Jesus saw the people and perceived their needs. It is difficult to effectively communicate with an audience without knowing something about them. Most learning takes place in the arena of a person's familiarity or interest. And so there's a difference here, as pointed out in the discussion, between the public speaker and the communicator. So it is noted that the public speaker puts the message before the people, and the communicator puts the people before the message. Secondly, the public speaker asks, what do I have? The communicator asks, what do they need? So the need of your audience is priority for the communicator. For the public speaker, it's about what does he or she have. The public speaker, the technique, and for the communicator, the key is the environment, the atmosphere. What sort of atmosphere are we creating for our audience? And those are key principles and differences. Goal is to complete the message, and the communicator, the goal is to complete the people. So those are some differentiations here between the public speaker and the communicator.
The focus is really different. The focus is
Yes.
people, the development of the people. And you see Jesus
Yeah, so there's a vast difference of how we communicate as the goal of the public speaker as against the communicator. Jesus used what was cultural to say what is timeless. He connected with them where they were in order to lead them or where they needed to be. So the audience is the priority of the communicator. He or she does his or her research about the audience that he's asked to communicate with and get a sense of the makeup of your audience, get a sense of their background, their perhaps even the levels of their experiences and education, so that your language is suitable for the audience that you're seeking to communicate. They would tell us that one of the safest way to communicate is to take the level of intelligence of a 10th grader, and that tends to be right across the board. You communicate to folks below that level and folks above that level. So you're sort of middle of the road. So we always have to know the people that we are seeking to communicate with. So when you ask as a communicator to speak at a particular to a particular audience, it is always wise to inquire and get some background information about the audience that they're inviting you to speak at. Because very often we accept invitations to speak at functions, events, without having clarity about what the intentions are for those who invited you to speak or to communicate. And very often, if we are not careful, and sometimes you have to adjust so quickly because understand that perhaps you weren't careful to do your background work and have to adjust the language that you use because of the kind of audience that you encounter. So do not accept invitations to present or to speak unless you have some background information on the audience. For example, we recently held our graduate presenter, person that we were asking to present or to speak, requested information about that particular occasion. They wanted to know the background of the institution. They wanted to know the theme of the event. They wanted to know what kind of people were at the event, those who were graduating, and what your potential audience would like. And so when that takes place, the presenter, the communicator, tends to be relevant and speak in the context of which he or she is invited to speak. So know your people. And then thirdly, we seize the moment. Our lesson is not just what you say, but when you say it. What is the moment? What is the occasion? Just celebrated the resurrection, Easter Sunday of Jesus Christ. And for most of our churches, and the focus was on the resurrection of Christ. So that was the context that you would have prepared to preach or to speak on as you were invited. In the same way, Jesus was conspicuously alert. He spoke when it was he knew that he had to understand the people. When the fullness of time had come, God sent him forth. So there's a particular moment in history when Christ came into the world. So here's some questions to ask about timing. Who is my audience? We hinted to that just a minute ago. Who is my audience? What are the questions and needs right now, needs of your audience that you're seeking to present or speak to? What needs to be accomplished most? What are the objectives of this event, occasion? And if those are spelled out clearly to your presenter or speaker or communicator, they have a better opportunity to be relevant and at the right moment. How can I build a bridge of relationship that they will bear the weight of truth? So, of course, one of the key responsibilities of a good communicator is to connect with your audience. Some do that by telling a story that connects the audience with you. Everyone likes story, basically. Children, young people, adults, we all love stories. And if, as a communicator, you have chosen the appropriate story or stories, as a matter of fact, that's one great way of communicating with your audience. Another aspect of a communicator is to use humor in your communication. Humor that is timely and relevant to the occasion. And so it means that you have done your homework. It means that you have researched your topic. You have you have found the right story that will communicate the message that needs to be communicated or that you've been asked to communicate to this particular audience. So it is a challenge when someone asks you on the last minute to come and speak for them. Usually, a wise communicator will turn down those invitations, unless it's a matter of perhaps life or death. They assume that since you are accustomed to speaking and presenting, that it is no problem. But usually, it is an awkward situation when a person goes unprepared and the expectations are high on the end of the audience, and the audience can easily get the sense that this person was really prepared for this activity. We're just blowing air, hot air, and we are not really communicating.
Turn off and anything, guys. That's very
Yes.
yeah.
And then it says number 4, we show the truth. It is not just what you say, but how you show it. Showing and demonstrating. So even in our speaking, some communicators are clever in using drama to communicate our message. As a matter of fact, it's one of the very effective tool, a mode of communication that people understand very readily when you can demonstrate it by some actions or a role play. And sometimes those communicate very effectively in terms of your audience. Every time you speak, your audience is quietly asking, and sometimes we take it, the audience is asking, why should I listen to you as the presenter? And they ask question, can I trust the speaker? Do they sense that you really care for them as a listener in the audience? And so there is as you mentioned, the verbal and non-verbal means of communication. So they would ask you as the communicator to make eye contact with the audience. So you're not just communicating in outer space, as it were. And that means sometimes focusing in different to at different individuals during the period of time. They would suggest that you start at the back of the room and move from different sections of your audience. They get a sense that you are looking at them and that you're focusing your attention toward them. And they would ask the question, do you know your subject? Is this the right person to speak on this particular topic? Do you know your subject? So it calls for preparation. They tell us that if the person prepares well, that's 90% of the job done. 10% is in the presentation. And so it really calls for the prep work. So share the truth. And there's a quote here by one author, Charles Allen, says, he might have preached lengthy sermons on the dignity of labor, temptation, how to enjoy life, the immortality of the soul, the worth of children, and the fact that God answers prayer. Instead, he worked in a carpenter's shop. He met and conquered temptation in the wilderness. He went to parties and laughed with other people. He raised his stock to love little children, and after he prayed, the power of the Lord was present. He might have talked long and loud about the need of man for human sympathy, the words of a woman, the worth of womanhood, the blessing of humility, and the equal worth of all men. Instead, he wept at the grave of a friend. He treated all women with deep respect. He took a towel and washed his disciples' feet. He gave his time to the poor and the outcasts. And so, of course, they're talking about Jesus Christ. Instead of talking about how he could transform lives, he took a harlot and made her the first herald of the resurrection, Mary Magdalene. Instead of preaching that people need bread, he fed the multitude. Instead of arguing the spirit stronger than matter, he walked on water. Instead of telling people how bad it is to be crippled, he said, arise, take up your bed and walk. Instead of merely telling people that they should forgive, while he was dying and being spit on, he prayed, Father, forgive them. So this is just examples of telling the truth, but not only speaking the truth, but doing the truth. So here he was demonstrating the truth in practical ways of the truth that he, and then fifthly, he talks about sharing the passion. It's not just what you say, but why you say it. Jesus spoke about his convictions. His convictions enable him to conclude that a prophet is not without honor, except in his own country. So his words were from his heart. He didn't speak out of routine or obligation. When he spoke, his words always had great meaning. So your audience would know if you are passionate about what you're saying, about what you're speaking about. They would measure and judge your sense of passion about how you communicate and why you communicate the way you communicate. So here's some tips for speaking with passion. Speak on themes that you own for yourself. So you have to be comfortable in your own skin about the themes or topics that you're speaking about. They must be internalized. It cannot be just something at the top of your head, as it were. It has to come from the heart. It has to come from the inner soul of your spirit, as it were. Be impact conscious rather than image conscious. So it is not about projecting image, but it's communicating impact consciously in your audience. Be authentic. Lock onto a pair of eyes with each point. So again, the eye contact. Be authentic in what you're saying. Paint pictures in their hearts. So, of course, you're talking to them about a particular issue and you want to create a story behind it. You want a picture. For example, Jesus was talking about when they asked him about who is the greatest in the kingdom. What he did by example, and this is by picture, he took a little child and he put her in the middle of them. So how do we paint pictures for others? Know what your goal is when you speak. So what is the result, objective you want to see as an outcome? Communication. If you're unclear, how much more the audience will be about what you're seeking to speak about and what you're seeking to communicate. At the end of this discussion on communication, as we are talking about, what is it that you want to see as the end result? Christ, the great communicator, of course, is a discussion. So these are some pointers on how paint pictures, know that your goal, know what your goal is when you speak. Prepare, of course, with prayer and let God build a fire inside you. So that comes out with a deep sense of understanding and being enabled by the power of the Spirit of God as a Christian leader. Then we seek the response. It's not just what you say, but know how they respond to it. And so Jesus would ask, have you understood those things? So you're speaking to your audience, and the goal is that they would understand what you are communicating to them. And there's some statistic here, 20% of most audience will act on their own, 80% of most audiences will not act on their own. So there's some tips of helping people to respond to truth. Have a clear objective for your listener to act on. So there's a call to perhaps decide to come to some decision or to participate in an activity or to buy in to a vision that you're casting. So that's your objective of this presentation that you're making, that you're seeking to communicate to your audience. Unless the communicator is very clear on what he or she wants to achieve through his audience, it's unrealistic to assume that we'll come to an objective end of this presentation that you are seeking to give. Reduce it to a simple phrase and write it down. So you want to be concise so that the message, the theme that you're seeking to communicate can be clearly remembered by a phrase or by a sentence. Too many engagements, even church or other functions, and great speakers, and everybody would clap at the end of a presentation. And as you walk around and as you talk to people and you ask, what did he talk about? And very often we could hardly give a proper answer of what was really said, because we have honed in on a particular key sentence and repeat it again and again, so that the end of the message or the presentation, at least that phrase or that sentence can be remembered. Of course, the famous speech of the late Martin Luther King, I have a dream. We may not know the speech by heart, but generally everybody knows the name. I have a dream. And as you look at the example of such a speech and presentation, ever so often I have a dream that this would happen. And I have a dream that one day, and I have a dream that this will come to pass. And so that was his punchline, as it were. Um, and we will read or listen to great speeches of the past. And there was always a resounding theme, a theme that was repeated again and again. Um, some of you may recall the speech of one of the late president, I think was it Kennedy. Ask not what a country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And although those speeches have been, not centuries, but many years, it looks like centuries, there are people who still recall the punchline of it. Yes. Winston Churchill, and we're probably talking to an audience who do not remember these names, but we may have all the people in the audience as well who can connect. So have a clear objective of your listener. Use a hook the listener can grasp and remember. So there's a particular theme or hook, as it is called, that you want people to remember. And that takes the preparation. Give them a point for their head and a picture for their heart. So we're reaching both their head and their heart, something that would stimulate the intellect, cause them to think, but also to create a passion in their heart. Provide a vehicle for them to use to respond. What is the vehicle or the method that you would call for a response? Typical church setting, it is perhaps raising a hand or standing up or walking forward. Different audiences is perhaps providing a response form that they can write comments, give you feedback, and you get a sense of whether you had really communicated. Ask for what you want them to do. So that's the challenge that you have to lay down as you close your presentation, as it were. What is it you want from your audience? What is it you want them to do? And not just to have a good feeling at the end of your presentation, but that there is some action toward this. So some must believe in God as a creator, believe in your message, believe in yourself, and then you believe in your audience.
If you're just joining us, ladies and gentlemen, we're discussing today Christ, the great communicator, improving your communication skills by imitating the master. And Jesus, the master we're referring to is Jesus Christ. And we know he is the author, he is the one that made us. And so he knows just how to communicate to our minds, our hearts, and our spirits. And, he did that so that we can learn more of him and have eternal life with him. Hear his word, hear what he's communicating to us. And likewise, as we communicate, there are some skills that we can employ to ensure that we have the same results, which is to simplify the message. Know the people, seize the moment, show the truth, share the passion, seek the response. And always want to communicate effectively so that we don't waste time, resources, or energy communicating that, we're speaking to an audience they don't understand. There's not a punchline. They leave not knowing what was said or cannot relate it or share. And that is very important in the kingdom, the sharing part. And most of it is done through communication. So as leaders, we ought to take that time to communicate. But mind you, as a communicator, you get anxious at times, yes? You get butterflies in your stomach.
Yes, of course, of course.
Maybe you stutter. You know, many different things
Yeah.
happen to us when you are getting in front of a crowd. Um, can you take us through some steps to reduce our anxiety as a communicator?
Great. So the best advice to us is to prepare extensively. The more ready you are, the more relaxed you'll be. So it's going to take time. You're not rushed in your preparation. You have taken adequate time to prepare. And so it builds confidence that you're familiar with your material and you don't necessarily have to read all the material before you. Um, what their bullet points that you would follow, just to keep you on track. And the more you can pay attention to the audience, I think it makes you effective communicator. Memorize your first line, as it were. Know the first three sentences of your opening story. So you're not reading, as it were, the first three sentences. It's familiar. You have it stored away in your computer, in your software, and you're able to come and speak to friendly eyes. So you look across your audience, and what's one of the first things that you do? You pan the audience, and you're going to have people who are friendly toward you. Perhaps there are people in the audience that you might know, and they're happy to see you. You connect with them. You get comfortable, focus on the faces that are interested. Um, in any given audience, you find disinterested people. It is your job to make those people become interested in what you say. That means that at times you raise the volume of what you're saying, or you insert a story that would draw them in. Yes. Um, Dress comfortably for the audience. So um, you must know the audience that you're going to speak at and speak with. And so it is appropriate dress for what you've been asked to come to. If you don't, you may get preoccupied, whether you're overly or underly dressed in the environment. So that's why the communication with the invite those who are inviting you, whom you're invited to speak at, and to speak to, provides those meaningful information. So if you sense that you're getting tense, we suggest take deep breaths. So you're not rushing. So deep breaths, it helps to relax you. It helps to give you composure. Visualize yourself being effective. So there's a sense that you're looking for a good outcome of your presentation. State your goal to yourself before you begin. So you are very clear what is your goal. Be clear on what your target is. Use visual aids, something that is quite readily available. They are all the PowerPoints and other visual cards, or flip charts, depends on where you are. And it is always wise to come to your occasion early. Come to the event occasion 15 minutes early to remove surprises. So that takes the stress off of you. If you're running late and your speaking engagement is right as you get through the door, it left you a little unraveled and a little anxious. The time before allows you to even get to meet some of the people who are in the audience. And of course, from the biblical perspective for Christian leaders, pray, pray, pray. Lean on God to communicate his vision through you. Be anxious for nothing, in everything through prayer and supplication with thanksgiving. Make your requests known to God, and let the peace of God, which passes understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through Jesus Christ. So these are six very critical points that we want to remember as we seek to communicate. Simplify the message. Yes, we want the message. We want to know the people, seize the moment, show the truth, share the passion, and seek the response. So there are some assessment that we'd like you to take. Jesus demonstrated 6 principles of communication. Which of these 6 do you already effectively practice, or which do you need to improve? So look at these 6 principles of communication and see where you are in terms of your own understanding and appreciation of them. What action will you take to become a better communicator? How will you communicate differently this week when you speak to people? The words of wise are like gold codes, and the words of scholars are like well driven nails given by one shepherd. Ecclesiastes 12:11. So there we have it for today. Simplify the message, know the people, seize the moment, show the truth, share the passion, and seek the response.
Ladies and gentlemen, there we have it. We'll be speaking again on the Christ, the great communicator. And, we're all involved in relationships, and the success of these relationships, highly depends on our communication skills, our ability to communicate. And the text in question today says the success of your leadership, your marriage, and your relationship with others depends a great deal on your ability to communicate. And he says your ability rests on your ability to connect with people, to share your ideas and vision, and motivate them to partner with you. And one former world leader said, if I could start all over again, I will go back to school and learn to communicate. So communication is a very important component in our lives, and we have to pay attention to it. Thank you, Reverend John, for taking us through quite a bit of information in such a short time. We did have a late today, but I pray that somebody got something that will help us in communicating and to be better communicators in the kingdom of God, because there's so many voices right now, so many people saying all sorts of things, and we have to, cipher through and see which is best to listen to, and then communicate that on to others for their development. Yes? So as we go today, we want to remind you that this Saturday, just a few days away, Walking with Hope, we're starting at 4 p.m. at the National Stadium on to the Montrouge and Grand Dance. And again, as we speak right now, just after 5, after 60 days, in the Miriam playing field, there is Burn It happening. Again, there's a fitness trainer on site. So if you want to condition yourself in preparation for Saturday and beyond, you can join the team on the Miriam playing field as they do some exercises. We thank you so much again for joining us. Reverend John, we appreciate you sharing again with us today this pertinent information.
Thank you very much. Yes, God bless you.
Right, listeners, we look forward to being with you next week and engaging with you around another session of Leadership Plus. Thank you for joining us today. Bye.